My name is Akeel Bilgrami. I'm a professor of philosophy and also the professor on the Committee on Global Thought at Columbia University. So let me first begin by asking the question, how is it that a term, populism, has come to be a term of criticism or pejorative concept? Well, it seems on the face of it surprising because populism in its generality means the opposition by ordinary people of the elites. Now, how can that be a bad thing? So you might ask, how did it come to mean something bad, given that this is an impeccable idea that ordinary people should oppose elites? Well, what is interesting is that ordinary people who do oppose elites do so on very good and sensible and sound grounds, but they also draw sometimes the wrong inferences from it. So, for instance, let's take an example of populism, or what is called populism. Let's take Brexit. Let's take the British withdrawal from Europe on the basis of a referendum. Now, you might ask, why is it that more than half the British population wish to withdraw from Europe? Now, the deeper question here is, let's ask, why should an ordinary person, a working person, say working in the Thames estuary or Nottingham, why would he, let's say, want to withdraw want Britain to withdraw from Europe? Think of the question as follows. Suppose this person asks, ever since the Second World War was over, in my country, there were extremely humane policies that were followed by the government. There were safety nets provided for people like me on health, on education, on housing. And he might ask, who provided that? At what site did this occur? And he would answer, on the site of the nation. It's the British government which provided all this. Then he might scratch his head and ask, well, what supranational site has ever provided these things? A site like Europe. What would it mean for a supranational site to provide welfare? What would be the mechanisms to dispense welfare at a site that is higher than the nation? And there is no site. He wouldn't be able, we can't even imagine what the mechanism would look like. So why would such a person want to be part of the union? See, these are all shrewd and good questions to ask. But now the person goes on from asking such questions to saying, well, these immigrant hordes who come here, they destroy my long-standing national culture of which I'm so proud, and they take away my jobs. Now, these are faulty inferences to draw from very sound questions that I was mentioning a minute ago. So I think populism has come to be a pejorative term, a term of criticism, only because the people who oppose the elites oppose them with sound questions, but then draw unsound anxieties from those sound questions. And that's I think, how the term populism has become not just the good thing it is, the opposition of elites, in this case the banking elites of Europe, but something which we also are critical of. And part of the reason why the elites oppose nationalism in the economic sphere, I don't mean in other spheres, but in the economic sphere, why they oppose it is because ever since the Bretton Woods institutions were dismantled, or I suppose remantled, capital flight has become a real anxiety for national governments. So if they have the kinds of progressive policies that were adopted by Britain, say, soon after the Second World War, if they today propose such things, then there's always an anxiety about capital flight. That's what neoliberalism has made capitalism into. And as a result, nationalism in the economic sphere would consist in finding the institutional structures, economic structures, by which this anxiety about capital flight would not occur. And that would mean having greater national sovereignty over one's economies. And that is a kind of nationalism, but the elites, global elites, opposed that. Well, I think there's just a lot of work to be done to think things through, and I think the DOC is a very good forum to try and do it. You see, let me put the point this way. So let's take a country like Brazil. So you've got a person like Lula getting elected on the basis of a tremendous workers' movement with a very progressive mandate. He couldn't implement most of the mandate because of the fear of capital flight, as I said. Now, within neoliberal globalization, one solution could be, well, what you need is another movement of the kind that elected Lula to be waiting to happen to wherever capital flies to. But that is a very unrealistic idea, because it would mean there would have to be international, global solidarities amongst working people. I can't imagine what that would look like. I mean, it's really, the mind boggles to figure out this, how such a solidarity on a global scale or by working and ordinary people could be constructed. So I feel, therefore, if that is not a serious possibility, what we ought to be spending our time thinking about is how it is that, say, countries like Brazil or other countries could de-link from this global political economy, which is really run by neoliberal elites, banking elites, corporate elites, and de-link from it and gain control over their own economy so that they can put constraints on capital in a way that existed until quite recently. And of course, it would also mean thinking through further things like how there might have to be South-South links or even credit agencies, which are sort of the analogs to IMF and World Bank and so on, working for poor countries. And these South-South links would protect the smaller countries, which are not able to manage on their own through this delinking from the global economy. So there would have to be sort of South-South relinks, or there would have to be other forms of relinks, alternative forms of credit agencies, and so on. These are all things to think about. I think they're extremely deep and important issues, and we haven't thought enough about them, and DOC is a very good site to do so. You see, my own view is that almost all liberal democracies have been democracies that function within a capitalist economy, and capitalism after the 80s basically has become this neoliberal form of capitalism. And what is interesting here is that many of these, so take India, take my country for instance, take a country like India, or even take a country like or America, take Trump. The authoritarian elements that emerge, I think, are genuinely pathological. They're pathological for the following reason. And I don't think capitalism can explain it. You need some further factors to explain it. Here's my reason for thinking so. Take India, which is a functioning democracy, one of the better functioning democracies. It has an increasingly neoliberal economy. In fact, it's now pretty rampant. And here's the thing. The government has the consensus of a wide range of classes. Middle classes, working people have also signed on to this government, have voted for it. Now, authoritarianism usually arises when this consensus is not there. You need to be authoritarian when the ruling class hasn't convinced the rest of the classes that the interest of the ruling class is the interest of the rest of the classes. Now, the Indian Prime Minister has managed to convince everybody of it, yet he's authoritarian. He doesn't need to be, because he has the hegemony. He's got the consent of everybody, and yet he's authoritarian. That, I think, shows that the authoritarianism is compulsive and it's pathological. And that's why people are rightly comparing these trends to fascism, because capitalism doesn't explain it. Capitalism may explain imperialism, but it does not explain these fascist tendencies that have emerged. And we need to think much harder and not just say it arrived. Capitalism and its crises, its chronic long-term crises, may prompt these things, but it's not sufficient to explain it, and we need to bring in further factors, and it's a very good research program too.